The sharpest weapon is not always a sword, nor the loudest insult, but the quiet absence of acknowledgement. Nothing unsettles the human spirit more than being rendered invisible. We fear rejection, but what we truly cannot bear is to be ignored, as if our existence holds no weight. Why does silence cut deeper than cruelty? Because cruelty admits your presence, while being ignored erases it entirely. Machiavelli understood this brutal truth. Neglect is not weakness, but a calculated strike. To deny attention is to deny power. The world believes control is found in dominance through words, through action, through force. Yet the most ruthless form of power is stillness, the refusal to give energy where it is demanded. This is not indifference. It is strategy. It is the shadowed art of control, not by striking the body, but by starving the ego. From the moment we are born, we cry not for wisdom or gold, but for attention. A baby's scream is a command to the world. See me, hear me, acknowledge that I exist. This instinct never leaves us. Every gesture, every word, every ambition carries within it a hunger to be noticed. Attention is validation, proof that we matter. Without it, people feel erased, as if their very existence dissolves into nothingness. Yet here lies the hidden problem. The more we crave attention, the more enslaved we become to those who grant or withhold it. A compliment can lift us, but silence can crush us. In relationships, in workplaces, in society, people bend and twist themselves not for truth or honor, but for the precious currency of acknowledgement. Attention is traded more ruthlessly than money, because it feeds the ego, not just the body. Modern culture disguises this dependency as progress. Social media thrives on it. Likes, shares, views, fleeting sparks of acknowledgement that keep millions addicted. People measure their worth in comments and glances, unaware that the true power lies not with those who post, but with those who choose to respond or to ignore. The one who controls attention dictates value. The one who withholds it becomes the master. Contrast this with the enemy you think you fear. A declared rival insults you openly, you at least exist in their world. But the silent figure who denies you attention holds greater power. They can make you doubt yourself, question your worth, spiral into insecurity. Insults sting, but being unseen corrodes the mind. The danger is that most people never realize they are slaves to this hunger. They chase validation endlessly, unaware they are giving their power away. Every desperate attempt to be acknowledged strengthens the grip of the one withholding it. The mind convinces itself, if they would just notice me, I'd be whole again. But this is the trap. Here is the dark insight. Attention is not love, respect, or truth. It is a leash. Whoever gives it can pull you closer. Whoever withholds it can make you crawl. The masses chase after it, the weak beg for it, but the powerful learn to starve their craving for it, and to weaponize it against others. The hidden enemy is not cruelty or neglect. It is dependence. When your sense of power comes from the gaze of another, you will always be ruled. True control begins not with seeking attention, but with mastering your need for it. And until you do, you will remain chained by the eyes of those who choose to look away. From childhood, we are trained in a dangerous myth disguised as politeness. Always respond, always engage, always be available. Parents tell their children, answer when spoken to. Schools demand attention and quick replies. Society frames silence as rudeness, delay as weakness, and disengagement as arrogance. The world whispers this rule until it hardens into instinct. To be good, you must always respond. But here is the truth. Constant response is not kindness. It is surrender. The more you engage without thought, the more you reveal desperation. Overtexting, oversharing, replying instantly to every message. These are not signs of strength. They are signals of weakness. They tell the world, I have nothing more valuable than you. I will bend my time, my energy, my presence to your command. And once that message is clear, your value collapses. Think of relationships. The one who is always available is never admired. They are taken for granted. Their eagerness feels cheap, their presence feels ordinary. Now compare this to the person who responds with patience, who does not rush to reply, who leaves silences hanging. Their words weigh more because they are rare. People lean in, waiting for the moment they choose to engage. Restraint creates gravity. Constant availability erases it. Modern culture magnifies this lie through technology. Phones buzz and we are trained to leap. Social media demands instant responses, punishes silence with invisibility. People believe politeness requires them to react immediately, but in reality, this addiction drains power. Corporations exploit this habit, keeping millions tethered to screens, enslaved by the expectation of constant connection. The irony is brutal. While society preaches that endless engagement makes you likable, it quietly strips you of authority. Leaders do not rush to reply, they choose when to respond. Kings did not answer every subject instantly. Their silence made their words holy. Machiavelli himself observed that rulers who preserved distance commanded more respect than those who tried to please with constant attention. Here lies the paradox. Silence and restraint create more influence than noise and availability ever could. The friend who replies instantly is comforting, but the one who responds carefully is respected. The employee who floods the room with comments is overlooked, while the one who speaks rarely, with precision, commands attention. The lie society told you is simple, that availability equals kindness, and kindness earns respect. But the brutal truth is this: constant availability cheapens you. You teach others to devalue you by teaching them you are always within reach. The strongest presence is not the loudest voice, but the voice that chooses when to speak. Engagement, when rationed, becomes influence. Silence, when chosen, becomes dominance. And the man who masters restraint becomes the one who dictates the terms of interaction. Machiavelli, the ruthless student of power, understood a paradox that still unsettles the human heart. Punishment can wound, but neglect destroys. A man punished is at least recognized. His existence is validated by the energy spent against him. But the man ignored? He is erased. And nothing terrifies the ego more than being reduced to nothing. Rulers who punished their enemies gave them a stage. History remembers rebels who were executed, martyrs who were crushed, rivals who were struck down. Violence, though brutal, gives dignity. It acknowledges the opponent as worthy of conflict. But the ruler who chooses silence, who turns away as if the rival is unworthy of even a glance, delivers a deeper wound. That silence becomes unbearable. It gnaws at the mind, forces obsession, drives the neglected into madness. Machiavelli advised princes not always to strike, but often to starve. Not to feed rivals with punishment or attention, but to let them rot in invisibility. To crush someone openly risks sympathy, but to ignore them strips them of air. They cannot gather pity, they cannot draw attention, they cannot grow. They shrivel under the weight of absence. The crowd forgets them and soon they forget themselves. This principle is not just political, it is psychological. To punish someone is to admit they matter. To ignore them is to declare they are irrelevant. Which is worse for the human spirit? Most would rather face wrath than emptiness. Wrath gives them a role in the story. Emptiness writes them out of it. Neglect is a mirror that reflects nothing back, leaving the desperate to claw for recognition. Think of personal relationships. A heated argument keeps the bond alive, however toxic. Both sides engage, feeding each other's existence. But silence after betrayal? No replies, no acknowledgement? That cuts far deeper. It creates obsession, because the one ignored cannot rest until they reclaim attention. They replay conversations, search for reasons, invent fantasies. Anything to escape the void of neglect. The absence consumes them more than cruelty ever could. Leaders throughout history have used this tactic with precision. A king who refuses to mention a traitor in public strips him of power more effectively than an execution. A general who refuses to acknowledge a rival's challenge leaves the rival humiliated before his followers. In every case, neglect creates not calm, but torment. Machiavelli's mirror is dark because it shows us a truth we resist. Neglect is not weakness. It is a weapon. To withhold attention is to seize control. It makes others chase you, obsess over you, need you. It starves their ego and forces their submission. The weak believe silence means indifference. The strong know silence, when chosen, is dominance. Neglect is not absence. It is presence in its most brutal form. It whispers, "You do not matter." And nothing makes people fear or obsess more than that. Silence is not the absence of action. It is an act in itself, a blade sharper than words. When someone expects a reply, a reaction, or a response, and instead receives nothing, their mind turns against itself. The silence becomes unbearable, not because it is empty, but because it is full of questions, doubts, and imagined answers. Psychologists know that humans crave closure. The brain seeks patterns, explanations, meaning. When confronted with silence, that need is denied. Instead of resolution, the mind spirals into obsession. The ignored person replays conversations, dissects gestures, and creates endless scenarios to fill the void. Each unanswered question breeds more questions. This is why ignoring breaks psychological balance. It forces the other person to fight their own thoughts, rather than yours. In negotiations, silence is often the most powerful move. A skilled manipulator lets the other side talk themselves into a corner, desperate to fill the uncomfortable pause. They reveal too much, concede too early, or compromise more than intended, simply because the silence pressed on their nerves. The one who holds silence controls the rhythm of the exchange. Words may fail, but silence never lies. It signals strength, patience, and dominance. In relationships, silence becomes even more lethal. An argument full of words, however heated, keeps both parties engaged. But when one person withdraws into silence, the other unravels. They push harder, overshare, apologize excessively, or spiral into insecurity. The predator's silence destabilizes them. It makes them chase the validation that is deliberately withheld. This is why ignoring someone often drives them to obsession. They crave acknowledgement, and the silence denies it like oxygen cut from the lungs. In politics, silence is a stage act. A leader who refuses to respond to an opponent's insult is not weak. He is strong. By ignoring the jab, he signals to the crowd that the opponent is beneath recognition. The opponent rages, becomes louder, more desperate, and in doing so looks smaller. The predator's silence does not protect. It attacks, without a word spoken. The dark truth is that ignoring is never passive. It is not indifference, it is strategy. Silence applies pressure more intensely than confrontation because it shifts the battle inward. Instead of fighting your words, the other person fights themselves. They expose their fears, their insecurities, their desperation. And while they unravel, you remain still, untouched, untouchable. Machiavelli would argue that silence is not the absence of dominance. It is its highest form. It is control without risk, power without exposure. By saying nothing, you give nothing to strike. By ignoring, you destabilize without lifting a hand. The predator knows this truth. Words can be countered. Attacks can be defended. But silence leaves the enemy defenseless against their own mind. To ignore is not to withdraw. It is to strike where it hurts most, in the fragile balance of the human psyche. Attention is currency. Every glance, every reply, every outburst is a deposit of power into someone else's account. Most people give it away carelessly, not realizing that the one who provokes them is feeding on their reaction. The manipulator does not need strength of his own. He only needs your energy, your response, your attention. Each time you react, you validate him. Enemies understand this well. The insult shouted across a room is not meant to hurt with words. It is bait. The true damage comes when you respond, when your face twists, when your voice rises. In that instant, you prove that the enemy holds sway over your emotions. Your reaction hands him the power he sought, even if your reply was sharp. To react is to admit that his existence shapes yours. Manipulators thrive on this trap. They poke, They provoke. They drip small doses of irritation into conversations, not for truth but for leverage. When you argue, explain, or defend, you are already ensnared. The moment you respond, you have acknowledged their frame, and inside their frame you cannot win. Your energy is wasted, your dignity diminished, and they grow stronger from the very act of your struggle. Even in love, the test of power is measured in reactions. A partner may pull away, grow distant, or provoke jealousy, not always out of cruelty, but to see if you will lose balance. The one who panics, who chases, who reacts impulsively, cedes authority. But the one who remains calm, even in silence, terrifies the other. It is not cruelty, it is control. Emotional power lies not in constant reassurance, but in the strength to resist the bait. This is why kings, generals, and rulers of old mastered the art of restraint. A ruler who reacts to every insult is weak, easily manipulated by whispers and flattery. But a ruler who withholds response, who ignores, who stays unmoved, forces others into doubt. His silence says more than words. You are not worth my recognition. That is dominance. The brutal truth is simple: he who reacts is ruled. The one who cannot control his impulses becomes the servant of those who can provoke them. Rage, jealousy, desperation. These are not weapons of the strong but chains of the weak. Every reaction is an admission that someone else controls your inner world. He who withholds response, however, rules. By ignoring, by staying calm, by refusing to give attention, he strips the enemy of fuel. The insult falls flat. The manipulator collapses without resistance. The lover becomes unsettled, drawn closer rather than driving you away. Silence and stillness become the tools of the predator. Machiavelli's lesson is timeless. Attention is power. The moment you give it, you surrender. The moment you deny it, you dominate. The strongest hand is not the one that strikes back. It is the one that refuses to move, forcing the other to break themselves upon their own need to be seen. Nothing unsettles the human mind more than silence. When someone is insulted, they know where they stand. When they are punished, they can explain it away. But when they are ignored, the absence of response leaves a void that the mind cannot tolerate. That void becomes an echo chamber, replaying questions without answers. Why? What does this mean? Am I forgotten? Did I lose? This is how obsession begins. Lovers feel this most sharply. The partner who once answered instantly now delays. The silence gnaws, every minute stretching into an eternity. They check their phone, they replay conversations, they rewrite the story in their head until anxiety becomes desperation. The ignored lover does not simply miss you, they obsess over you. The silence you command becomes louder than any words you could have spoken. Rivals too crumble in the shadow of neglect. A man insulted in public at least knows his enemy acknowledged him. But the rival who speaks, who provokes, who postures, only to be met with silence, feels invisible. And invisibility is unbearable. His ego cannot tolerate being erased. He grows reckless, desperate to force a reaction, and in doing so he exposes himself. Neglect robs him of composure, pushing him to make mistakes that a calm observer can exploit. Even nations have collapsed under the weight of being ignored. Empires sought recognition, sought to be seen as powerful. When their rivals refused to acknowledge them, they often overextended themselves in acts of aggression just to reclaim visibility. The desperate need to be noticed is not weakness in a few. It is a flaw etched into human nature itself. The shadow of obsession grows strongest in those closest to you. Friends left unacknowledged start to doubt their place. Allies begin to wonder if their loyalty matters. The silence of their leader pushes them toward obsession, sometimes even betrayal. The ignored mind cannot rest. It turns inward, and then outward, seeking resolution at any cost. What they cannot resolve with your words, they attempt to resolve with their own destruction. This is why Machiavelli taught that ignoring an enemy is often more devastating than punishing him. Punishment grants him dignity, recognition, and even martyrdom. Ignoring him makes him nothing, and to be nothing is intolerable. The enemy who is ignored will rage louder, chase harder, and reveal his weakness in the frenzy of being unseen. You do not need to strike him. He strikes himself over and over in the hope of being noticed. The dark insight is this: the greatest weapon is not the blow you deliver, but the silence you command. The ignored mind becomes its own executioner. Lovers chase until they collapse. Rivals expose themselves. Allies stew in envy and fear. Ignoring does not kill the body, it consumes the mind. And in the end, the ignored destroy themselves without you lifting a finger. Perception is the true battlefield of power, and silence is its sharpest blade. Words may persuade, arguments may entertain, but silence unsettles and endures. To ignore is not to retreat, it is to dominate the field without moving a muscle. In the eyes of others, the one who speaks less is seen as stronger, while the one who chases responses appears weaker. In politics, leaders who remain silent while others shout take control of the stage. Their silence forces the world to interpret, speculate, and project meaning onto them. Rumors swirl, analysts debate, and enemies panic, but the silent figure dictates all without lifting his voice. Machiavelli understood this. Fools defend themselves, but the wise allow others to speak themselves into weakness. To answer every accusation is to lower oneself. To ignore is to rise above, making your presence heavier than words ever could. In personal life, the same battlefield unfolds. The lover who responds instantly gives away their need. The lover who withholds, who chooses when to answer and when to ignore, controls the rhythm of the relationship. Silence plants doubt, and doubt breeds desire. In friendships, the one who always explains, always defends, appears lesser. But the one who ignores the trivial challenges holds an aura of superiority. The message is clear: your words are not worthy of my response. This principle also defines negotiation and business. A desperate man fills silence with concessions, promises, and panic. A powerful negotiator stays still, letting the silence stretch until the weaker side cracks, revealing their true limits. Every second of quiet increases pressure. Every unanswered word makes the speaker expose more than they intended. The one who resists the urge to fill silence wins without needing to argue. Silence also shapes the narratives of nations. Propaganda thrives on noise, repetition, and distraction. But true rulers understand that withholding information can be more powerful than spreading it. A government that ignores a critic often diminishes him more effectively than one that responds to him. Recognition fuels influence. Neglect kills it. In perception, absence is louder than presence, because people fear what they cannot see. The battlefield of perception is not about truth, it is about what people believe. And silence bends belief. It magnifies mystery, amplifies authority, and destabilizes enemies. The fool argues to prove his worth. The master ignores and lets others waste their energy. The fool shouts in defense. The strategist sits quietly and dictates the narrative by what he chooses not to acknowledge. Philosophy teaches us this brutal law: the one who can afford to ignore rules. For ignoring demands strength, restraint, and control over one's own ego. The weak cannot bear to be silent. They need to be seen, heard, validated. But the strong weaponize silence to create fear, obsession, and submission. On the battlefield of perception, it is not the loudest voice that commands respect. It is the silence that everyone else cannot stop hearing. Power is not always about what you say or do. Often it's about what you choose not to acknowledge. Ignoring, when done with calculation, can shift the balance of power in every arena of life. The challenge is to use it as a weapon, not as an escape. When applied with precision, it elevates authority, creates scarcity, and commands respect. But when abused, it isolates and destroys. At work, ignoring is a shield against pettiness. Offices are filled with gossip, drama, and pointless challenges to ego. The insecure leap into arguments, eager to defend themselves. But the person who refuses to engage in trivial conflicts appears stronger. Silence communicates: I am above this noise. By not reacting, you make others reveal their desperation. Leaders master this tactic. They know that every response validates the challenger, while ignoring diminishes him into irrelevance. Authority is built not by fighting every battle, but by refusing the ones that don't matter. In relationships, ignoring can be the difference between being manipulated and being respected. Emotional games thrive on attention. When someone tries to provoke jealousy, guilt, or desperation, reacting gives them control. Ignoring breaks the cycle. Scarcity of response creates weight. Every word you do give becomes valuable. Lovers who respond instantly are taken for granted. Lovers who respond with restraint become magnetic. This is not cruelty, it is discipline. By not rewarding emotional traps, you preserve your dominance and stability. In society, ignoring is the only defense against the endless noise designed to weaken your focus. Social media thrives on outrage, distraction, and dopamine hits. The masses argue endlessly online, defending themselves against strangers, validating fools with attention. But those who ignore the noise and focus on building power stand apart. Attention is currency, and the moment you give it freely, you are bankrupt. Machiavelli would advise, ignore the circus, study the structure. The less you are distracted, the more control you hold over your own life. Still, ignoring must never become avoidance. Avoidance is weakness, it comes from fear. Ignoring is strength, it comes from choice. The key difference is intent. If you stay silent to escape, you surrender. If you stay silent to dominate, you control. Silence should not be your default, it should be your strategy. Overuse it and you risk isolation. Apply it selectively and you create an aura of power. The warning is clear. Ignoring is not passive. It is an active weapon of psychological warfare. Use it to deny attention to manipulators, to strip drama of its power, and to make your presence scarce and valuable. But never let it turn you into a ghost. The goal is not to vanish. It is to make others realize their noise cannot touch you. In a world enslaved by attention, the one who can withhold it rules. Power is rarely where people expect it. The world teaches us to believe that dominance comes from loud voices, sharp words, and grand displays. Yet history whispers a darker truth. The ones who controlled empires, commanded armies, and bent nations to their will often did so not through noise, but through silence. The greatest power is not in striking, it is in withholding. Attention is the currency of human interaction. To give it is to validate, to elevate, to concede that the other matters. To withhold it is to erase them. An insult, a punishment, even an attack gives your rival dignity, because it recognizes their existence. But to ignore them? That denies them the stage. It reduces them to a shadow clawing for acknowledgement, lost in their own desperation. This is the tyranny of silence, the quiet crown that crushes without lifting a blade. Think of it. The loudest scream eventually fades, but silence echoes forever. Words can be argued, defended, or forgotten. Silence cannot. It lodges itself in the mind of the ignored, growing heavier with every unanswered moment. They replay it in their thoughts, question their worth, and invent reasons to explain your restraint. You have spoken nothing, yet you have planted doubt deeper than any insult could reach. That is psychological warfare at its purest. Machiavelli understood this. He warned that rulers who punished gave their enemies a role in the theater of power. But rulers who ignored, they turned rivals into ghosts. Neglect created more fear, more uncertainty, than open hostility ever could. A king who strikes makes enemies stronger through resistance. A king who ignores makes them invisible, forgotten, erased. Invisibility is a wound no weapon can heal. For you, the lesson is simple yet brutal. Master the discipline of ignoring. Not as avoidance, cowards avoid. Not as indifference, the weak pretend not to care. But as strategy sharpened into power. Use silence to unnerve your rivals, to strengthen your presence, to raise the value of your words. Speak rarely, and when you do, each syllable will carry the weight of thunder. Withhold attention, and you will watch others unravel under their own need to be seen. But here lies the final paradox. Silence is not absence. It is a weapon. It must be wielded with intent, or it becomes isolation. Too much neglect and you vanish. Too little and you are consumed by noise. The mastery lies in balance, knowing when to withhold, when to allow, when to erase with silence, and when to command with presence. Machiavelli's darkest lesson is simple. The hand that withholds is stronger than the hand that strikes. Master this and you will never need to shout, argue, or beg for control. You will watch as the world bends under the weight of what you did not say.